Hello, welcome to After the Tower, a podcast about change and transformation. My name's Toland and I'm your host, and I'm happy to be with you here in this moment. We have a really special episode today with someone who is just really near and dear to my heart, and someone I've been connected with for a very long time. It's Louise Rayner, who the headline is that she was my family's nanny for 5 years in my childhood. Specifically, she was with us in September 11th and 2.5 years afterwards. And she is so much more than that. She is, part of what makes me me, and her love and support that I had as a child was so valuable. And we talk about it in the podcast, and we have stayed in touch. I was a bridesmaid in her wedding, and I visited her in England, and she's just someone who I know I was meant to know, and I know I was meant to be a part of my life. And every time we connect, it's very like no time has passed. But anyway, she had reached out to me because she had listened to the podcast, and we were connecting, and I was like, I'd love to have you on. I think it would be so cool to have a conversation with you, because she's been through a lot of change and self-development in the past little while, and I thought it would be interesting to hear her perspective, especially as someone who now is 50, 51. There's a different perspective you have on life. And so we talk a lot about her life story, but also her journey in self-development, and specifically her decision to quit drinking. And for those of you that are interested in human design, she is a 4-6 profile, which is, you can see that trajectory a lot in her story. If you're a human design person, you can see those 3 life phases, and you can see that that coming off the roof thing that's starting to happen for her, which I think was really interesting to notice in our conversation. But really, it's just, it's just such a sweet moment for us to connect, and I'm so excited for you all to hear her wisdom, what she has to say, and just hear more about us. But anyway, so just some information about her. She is a 4-6 reflector, and she is a Libra rising, a Taurus sun, and Sagittarius moon. And you can find her work. She's an amazing photographer at Louise Rayner Photography on Instagram. I will link it in the show notes, but definitely connect with her and the work she's doing on there. And I'm, tolandlawrence.com. So check me out if you want to do human design readings, coaching, whatever. Anyway, I hope you enjoy the episode. And yeah. All right. Hello, Louise. We're recording.
Hello, Toland.
How am I finding you in this moment? How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Yes, I'm very good. It's the end of the day. It's rained all day here in Yorkshire, but yeah, it's been a good day.
Good. Yeah, and it's 9:30 a.m. here in Nashville, and I'm not a morning person, but I got up, I got my coffee, and I'm here and excited to have our conversation
I
across the world.
appreciate the early start.
I think I want to start this conversation just with providing people context with how we know each other, because I think it's important and unusual. And well, obviously, like the headline is that you were our family nanny for several years. Specifically, you were around when my father died. But you were so much more than that. And I always say that, I don't know how to say that, you were just such an important figure in my childhood and such an important support. And and we've kept in touch, and I do think we talked about this, like there are people that come into your life and there's a meaning to it. And you are absolutely one of those people for me. Just you as an example in my life opened me up to possibilities that I then pursued. Like, I don't think I would have traveled as much as I did in life if I hadn't had that example of you growing up. I don't think I would have been comfortable with certain things and certain choices if I hadn't had you as an example. And you just were someone who was a source of support to me growing up that was so needed and appreciated, and I think contributed to like my belief in myself in a lot of ways. And I know I'm just rambling, but you are just
Oh, that's so lovely. I mean, it's so
you're just the
lovely. Thank you
best,
so
and
much.
you always were. And I still feel this strong connection with you, even though we don't
Yeah.
connect as much.
Yes.
But like when I came to visit you and your family, like it was just such a joyous thing. And anyway, so now you live in Bradford, England, and you
Yes.
have 3 children. Your oldest is 18, which is crazy to think
Yep.
about.
I know. And you were like a bridesmaid at our wedding.
I
So
know.
that was,
And
almost
he was
20
so
years
little then.
ago. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And you've been to visit a few times,
Yeah.
and every time you've been, you just slot right in. It's I'm not going to say you're like my little sister, but you're like, you just that relationship we've got is very, very special. It is very special. And we can just pick up without having seen each other for years and years and see each other. And it's just like yesterday. And I feel like I did in your kitchen, making your shepherd's pie,
Yeah.
singing, dancing, just being silly. And it's just that kind of, it's just not gone away, hasn't that feeling or that relationship? And it's so lovely. It's so lovely.
It really hasn't. And it's a special thing. And so obviously, you reached out to me saying that you had been listening to the podcast and we were talking, and you've been on your own self-development journey separately. And I was like, want to come on the podcast? Like, this could be a cool conversation to have. And I think you have so much wisdom and experience and things to share. And I thought it would be a cool one to have. I think when we had our conversation, I mean, as I said, you've been on a self-development journey for a while, but you've also been on like a looking back at your life and
Yeah.
looking back at the experiences that you've had and how they have formed you and shaped you, and what meaning that they have, or that you can see now that you're looking back that maybe you didn't see at the time.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of ground to cover. But I think what we talked about, and like a big shift that you've noticed in yourself, is your self concept and this idea of how you see yourself and view yourself. Like, I think that's undergone quite a shift in recent years. And so I'd like to begin with, because you shared with me you kept journals throughout your youth, and you looked back on them, and you would look at how you would talk about yourself, and you would be like, wow, I was really harsh with myself. And so talk to me about, you know, who you were when you were young and how you viewed yourself, and just what was that grounding for you in that time period.
I mean, so I was born in the 70s in Yorkshire and into a very Catholic house. And I think that in itself is just quite a difficult kind of dynamic to be born into, because you're born with Catholic guilt. So my parents were very, went to church every Sunday, just always thinking about what the next person was doing at church. And so you just had this expectation when you were growing up that you would act a certain way, and that you couldn't disappoint. And then coupled with that, you had this, you've got to do well in school, and you've got to be a good girl and follow all the rules. There's no place for rule breaking. There's also no place for failure. So you couldn't, it's almost like you couldn't, I grew up almost like not being able to trust myself, because I had to do what was expected. And so growing up, it was hard. I mean, don't get me wrong, it was a really nice childhood. I had a lovely childhood. I can't say it was bad, but I was never told I'm proud of you. We didn't say I love you. All the things that now I've got children, I know are so important. My children can go and do whatever they want in life. They can go and be a zookeeper. They could go to the moon, and I would support them everywhere. I never had that. And I think looking back now, that has had a real impact from growing up to now. And now all of a sudden I'm like, those limiting beliefs that I had growing up were just, well, they're just really harmful. So I had that with like parents' expectation and school. And then in friendships, I was always the one that was kind of picked on or, told that, why do you listen to that music? It's rubbish. Or why do you want to do that for a job? That's rubbish. Or just made fun of all the time for everything. Why are you wearing that? Why you got those clothes? And like now I can see it's kind of perhaps jealousy but as a child, you don't see that. As a child, you just think, I'm strange, I don't fit in. Then I've got to try harder to fit in. And so what I learned to do was just, I guess, just squash the person who I really was. So I started listening to the music that their friends listened to, or liking the boys' friends, liked, or so not being able to trust your own view of the world or your own opinion, or you just become like a sheep, don't you?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that looking back, that way of growing up and that kind of, that never feeling good enough. I got from everything, from school, from parents, from friends, and so you just put yourself at a lower level all the time.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think what you're talking about, I mean, again, like that was the culture at the time was,
Yeah,
like that was what was expected. The conformity is what I
yeah,
see so much as
yeah,
you either conform and you're accepted or you don't conform and you're punished until you start to
yeah,
conform.
yeah, yeah,
Right. And again, like that wasn't like just from what you're sharing, like that was everyone was doing that.
yeah,
But if you were more different, you got more punishment. If you were more within the bounds of what was accepted, you got more praise. But either way, it was about pushing people into the same box,
yes, yeah,
And of
yeah,
course, when you don't fit in the box, you're going to get this feeling like there's something wrong with me.
yeah,
There's something wrong with me. And I have to shift myself to make sure that I can become whatever is right, whatever
yeah,
people say is right. And that sticks with you. I mean, of course
yeah,
it does. It builds a narrative in your head that you move forward with.
yeah. Or you just blame yourself all the time.
Yeah.
That's what I did. From looking at
Yeah.
those books, that's what I did. It was always my fault.
Yeah.
Like everything was always my fault.
Yeah.
So when, I had a boyfriend that, for 4 years when I was like a late teenager, and, he cheated on me, that was my fault.
Yeah.
And when I told my mum, it was right in my finals degree. And she just, she sat me down. I can remember her doing it. And she sat there and said, well, I hope you're not going to fail your degree. Like that's what she said. After 4 years of being with somebody, that's what she said to me. That was it. And she never liked it, and it was just all that kind of just that growing up feeling like you were a silly girl all the time, even when you got to be a teenager or a late teenager. And it was always that feeling of, oh, you're making stupid mistakes, or and it was that kind of, and it's really, I look now and I just think I've got a picture of myself when I was 16, and it was hard being 16, doing exams and all that kind of stuff and studying and falling in with the wrong crowd, as my mum still tells me now, even though they weren't the wrong crowd, they were just a crowd of girls who they were the oldest in their families. So, I mean, sorry, they weren't the oldest. I was the oldest in my family. So my family were going through me going out for the first time, whereas they were like 3, 4 kids into a family. So by that, the parents weren't interested, they weren't bothered that the kids were going out on a Saturday night. Whereas my parents, I was the first one, so they were like, I was being led astray or whatever. They weren't bad kids, they were just not right for my parents or whatever. Well, not my parents, it was my mum. So you're just battling all the time. You're just battling with all decisions that you're making. I wanted to be a photographer, and I was told, oh, you can't do that because there's no money to be made in it.
Mm.
Like that's what they told me. You go off and do a theology degree because that's what you need an academic degree. So that's what I did. Like I did, and I can't believe now that I actually did that. I actually at 18 years old went off and did something I didn't want to do because they told me that's what we should do.
Yeah. But the thing is, you are not the only person to have that experience.
No,
This
no,
this is you are among many who were forced into things or pushed into
yeah,
things by authority figures, parental figures, cultural figures. And that's so much of what's wrong with our society is that it like you had this thing in your heart of photography and art and beauty, and the world couldn't, like our culture couldn't accept that. You had to do
No.
something practical. You had to be
Yeah.
rational.
Especially in those days where there were very few universities doing a degree in
Right.
photography. And because my parents come from a very academic, and I was the first one in the family to go to proper university. And so it was, and I get it, they were doing the best that they could with how they'd been brought up. And they wanted me to be that next step up. And I understand that. And I think I can see it from a different point of view with my children now because I've been through that and I know the world is completely different now to what it was when I was going to university. And I won't encourage my children to go to university because there's so many other avenues and so much they can do without getting that degree if that's what they don't want to do. It was a bit like that fixed mindset when I was growing up. There wasn't that growth mindset. It wasn't like it was you must do well in exams. It wasn't have you tried your hardest? It was you failed because you didn't pass. It wasn't like you did the best to your ability. It was very much that fixed linear path. And it's just not like that.
No, the world is
And it
not like
wasn't
that now.
yeah.
The world's
Yeah.
not like that now. And the world worked that way back then, but people weren't like that. So many people suffered because they didn't fit in those boxes. They didn't fit in those lines. And so you went through this experience where you did sacrifice what you wanted to please others, but you also made a huge leap when you were young to move to America. And that I would imagine wasn't something that people thought of for you.
No, I mean, yeah, it wasn't. I do a lot of manifestation and things like that. And when I was younger, I saw the Coca-Cola advert with the Robert Beck song in it, and it was filmed in California. And when I was about 7, and I was like, I'm going to move to America, and so I plant these seeds. So and like another thing, I really wanted to go to the Amazon when I was younger. Like it was just a place that I really wanted to visit. And it's funny now looking back, these are things that I've made happen. So when I decided to move to America, I kind of just decided and I was going to do it. And it was almost like that was my path. That's what I was going to do. But I just didn't know how I was going to get there. And I'd been to visit a friend who had a year at university and she went to Boston. And so the year before, I'd been to see her in Boston. And for one day, we'd got up at 5 o'clock in the morning and we'd gone to New York City. And I was like, that's where I'm going to live. That I came back and I was like, that's it. If I'm going anywhere, I'm going there. And so I went down. A friend was applying for au pair in America, and I was like, okay, that sounds like a good plan because I'd done my degree and I didn't want to do anything with theology because it didn't interest me, even though I'd done well in the degree. I was like, I still wanted to do photography. It was still there. I just thought, why not? Why don't I just do it? So I applied, didn't get to get to New York, but I got Boston, which was close enough because I'd already done that commute from Boston to New York. I was like, oh yeah, that's good. And then the really bizarre thing is I'd booked to go and then I changed my ticket at the last minute. So I was booked on the 4th of November and I changed it to the 17th of November. I don't know why I changed it. I can't remember why I changed it, but I went on the 17th and I met Joanne on the plane who ended up coming to your house for the year. And had I not met her, I would never, we wouldn't even be sitting here because it was just so random. And so obviously moved over there with a view to reinventing myself. I just thought I'm going to go and I'm going to give myself a go and I'm going to try and do without having the voices of friends or parents or whatever, like you're silly or you're failing or whatever. I'm going to just try and do it for me. I'm going to try and start again.
I think that's so like smart. Like, you know what I mean? Like it's hard to change around people who expect you to be a certain way. Do you know what I mean? Like it's so common that people like move away or move out to change. And I feel like that about my national move in some ways too. Like it's like I needed to become someone different. I needed to be around different people.
Yeah, like a fresh start, like a total fresh start. Yeah. So pick yourself up and just actually move somewhere completely different. So you can meet new people and start again. kind of introduce yourself as a different person. I
Again,
mean, I even
it's not the full solution. Do you know what I mean? Because you're
no,
still you.
no,
You come with
no,
you with all your stories in your head, but it
yeah,
can help sometimes. And I think
yeah,
that's what you were doing. Like you
yeah,
knew on some level you needed to be in a different environment, but also this manifestation you had, this was
yeah,
your path. And
yeah,
I do feel that. I think that you were meant to be in the States for the period that you were.
yeah. I absolutely. So after Boston, I mean, obviously I'd come down and I'd stayed with you. So what I used to do was come down once a month and stay with Joanne in your house. And then I got to meet you and the family and also meet the group of girls that then became my very close group of friends. And then obviously after the year, I wanted to stay in America and she wanted to leave to go traveling around Australia. So it was just, your mum said, would you like to move in and stay here? But I didn't want to do it. Everybody else did it illegally. I didn't want to do it illegally. I wanted to do it the proper way because I do proper things the proper way.
Yeah.
And so I thought, do you know what? I could go to college and get my photography degree. I can do it. So I came back home and I got a student visa that was valid for 5 years. And then I moved back and then I moved in with you. And it was perfect because I went to college, you went to school and just worked out perfectly fine. It was brilliant. It was brilliant. So I did an associate's degree at Union County College, which I aced. I got like perfect 4.0 and just met so many inspiring teachers. And I did so well because I wanted to be there. And I think every class that I took, I chose and I loved it, and I was like the swot of the class because I was always the one that got the best grades because that to me was like, it was just brilliant. I just loved it. And then I got a job working in the dark room. And so I was doing all photography and I was doing it on the side as well. And it was just, yeah, it was brilliant. It was really good.
And I feel like in a way that was like healing the previous experience you had with college. Like you got to do it the right way or the way
Yeah,
that you wanted to do. Like
yeah,
it was you
yeah,
saying, you correcting in a way that experience that you had where you were forcing yourself to do something you
yeah,
didn't want to do.
yeah. It was
Yeah.
almost like growing up. It was almost like
Yeah.
saying, I'm a grown up now, even though I was a grown up when I did my first degree in England. But it was almost like saying, this is me, I'm doing this, and I don't need,
Like reclaiming your agency or
yeah,
reminding yourself of your agency in a way.
yeah. And so I was very happy. I'd put weight on when I went to Boston. I'd kind of put weight on, and I was not as happy there as I was when I moved to New Jersey and things. So it was so a lot of when I moved to New Jersey, a lot of like I lost weight and I just became a lot more confident and a lot more. It just everything felt like it fit and like I fit, and I met some lovely friends, and so it was just everything
So many of
was
them you're still friends with. I mean,
yeah,
it's
yeah,
crazy.
yeah. It was yeah, it was amazing. It was. I just loved it. I just really, really loved it. I loved it all.
Yeah, like so you had this moment where you got away and you got to yeah, like reclaim your agency and feel that ability. And obviously, the elephant in the room of our experience in New Jersey together is 9/11.
Yeah,
And what we talked about, and again, like I haven't talked about that experience on my podcast yet. It's just because I was so young, it's so tender. It's my perspective on it is going to be very different from yours.
yeah,
I know that you
yeah,
had an experience of that. And I
yeah,
know that it shaped you. And I want to hear about that. And I think it's important because as you say, I think you say looking back, you can feel like seeing us go through that, being a part of that with us did shape you. And I know that you had a moment where you had like a 9/11 experience where there was your life trajectory could have changed if it had not been for 9/11. And so just talk to me about that for you, whatever you feel like sharing from your perspective and from how
yeah.
that shaped your life.
Yeah. I'm not going to go into like what happened on the day because
Right.
I'm forever grateful I was able to be there.
Yeah. I mean,
With
me
you,
too.
for
Like just the
you,
fact
and
that you were there was
yeah.
important.
I think from my being on my the day before, I was prepping for an interview because I had an interview in New York on the 12th of September to work in an advertising agency. And that's all I'd wanted to do. Like I wanted to work in an advertising agency, like with the like creativity and all that kind of. I was always coming up with ideas for adverts and things like that. And I was like, so I'd done my 2.5 years at college and I'd got my associate's degree. But then on the back of that, you could get a 1-year working permit. So if you had a company that you could work for. So that was the whole idea, was that I would go and I hadn't quite worked out whether I would stay living with you in New Jersey or what would do, but I was going to go for this interview and then hopefully that would then lead to this 1 year and then hopefully it would lead to something more permanent and
in
me
the
being able to
States.
stay. Because that was ultimately what I wanted to do. I'd got to the point where I'd been there for so long that it was my life and I wanted to stay. You know, that was me. I was staying stateside. And so obviously at 9/11, you know, there was just, I never even thought about the interview. It never even came into, it was just, I just stepped into what I needed to do at that time. And that was just to be as I had been. And that would never change. That was me.
And it was such an incredible gift to us, like truly, like that you stayed. It meant a lot.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's just yeah. And looking back now, I'm so grateful I could stay for another 2.5 years. So I was with you 5 years in total, 2.5 with your dad, and then 2.5 without. And so it was, and the only reason. So the funny thing is, the other day I was looking for my book to find when I was born, my baby book, and I found a letter that I'd written to the President of the United States.
Really?
Yeah, really. So the only reason I left after 2.5 years was because I completely exhausted any avenue of being able to stay legally.
Yeah.
So my last avenue was to write to the president and ask him if he'd give me a green card based on this situation I was in. And so I found the letter that I got back from the vice president, and it was like all, signed by the office of the vice president.
Oh my gosh.
I know. So because the visa was running out and and because I hadn't used the working permit, you couldn't do anything with that. And so I wanted to make sure that I left knowing that I'd exhausted, or I didn't want to feel like you would feel I deserted you, or even though it was like a few years later and anything. But so me and your mum, we went to an immigration lawyer, and they said to me, the only way that you can stay is if you get married. And I was like, I just didn't have anybody. So that's when I thought, I'm going to write. So I wrote to the senator of New Jersey. I wrote to the president, the vice president. I wrote to lots of people. And anyway, everybody came back and said, right, what a really tragic story. And we'd really like to help, but sorry, we can't.
Wasn't meant to be, though.
So now I know this is it. So one of my life things is that you're always at the right time. You're exactly where you're supposed to be at that time. And that, for me, I was meant to be with you when it went at 9/11. I was meant to leave when I did. And so I think a lot of what I'm reflecting now and looking back, it's about accepting, like, there are things that you can't change, and I can't go back and change anything, but I can accept where I was at that time, and I can accept what happened afterwards.
Yeah.
As a result of being at that place at that time.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's so true. And I think when we get to that perspective, it can ease a lot of the resistance that we experience in life. If we can say that, like, I'm here right now for a reason, and this is happening for a reason. Again, whether that's like objectively true or not, I don't know, but it helps. It helps live life when you have that perspective. And as you say, looking back, it feels true. I think you were supposed to be there, but I think you were also supposed to leave. And like, as I say, for example, like after you left, you traveled around the world, and I got to see you do that. And it inspired me to do the same later on in life. And so you were still a part of my life, even when you weren't. Yeah. And you got to have all these amazing experiences that was what was supposed to happen, you know?
Yeah.
And
And if I hadn't changed that ticket and met Joanne
yeah,
and
right.
then met you and then met Elmo, who I then traveled around the world with, and she was also a bridesmaid, and we would never, like me and Elmo, she's from London, I'm from Yorkshire, we would never have met. We're just
No.
two completely different characters. We just never would have met, but we are the best of friends. And so I would never have, gone through all of that with her. And it was, yeah, it's just funny, the
And
way
you
that
took so many amazing photos when you were traveling and like got to hone in your craft in so many ways. And it's
yeah.
just so cool that you have all that, you know?
Yeah, yeah, and all the journals that I wrote, I didn't realize till like we were clearing out my mum and dad's house that my dad had. So I used to write emails to everybody in the group, and so that people could see what I was doing, and they were like little, they were almost like travel diaries. And my dad had printed out every single one that I'd sent, and he's like got this folder that's like this big full of these. And so even though when I came back in true Yorkshire style, it was like, oh, don't talk to us about your travel journeys, because people don't like you blowing your own trumpet in Yorkshire. They don't like they don't want people to like be above your station. And again, that's about keeping yourself small and keeping you don't shout about your accomplishments or whatever. But it obviously secretly he was very proud of me keeping these journals that he's kept. So yeah, and I got to travel, and then literally, a year after I came home, I put myself in a situation where I was able to then find my husband. So
I know. You went all the way around the world, then came back to Bradford.
I know, no.
You met
And
your
again,
husband.
and again, the whole, when you get the diaries out, and in the diary it says, LM for OR in a heart, in a love heart. And you're like, I planted the seed when I was like 10. That was me. It's just crazy. And then when I look back and I think to myself, like, that I didn't trust myself, or that not that I didn't do anything, but I think a lot of the things that I did that I've achieved in life, I've done off my own back. So moving to America, traveling around the world, these are things that I said I was going to do, and I did them. And then the way I met Oliver was, was in this bar on the day after, so it was Boxing Day, the day after Christmas Day, and I was with some friends from primary school that we both knew. And I was with these girls, and we saw Oliver's cousin, and he was talking to one of my friends. And I said, "Oh, you're Oliver Rayner's cousin," and so I just said, "Oh, how's he doing?" And oh, what's he doing in life? And found out he was single. He had this business. He still was in Bradford, blah blah blah. And I just said, "Oh, can I have his number? I'll just get in touch with him as a friend." And so that's what I did. I got home that night and I texted him and I said, "Oh, I've just moved back. I've been traveling around, and if you ever fancied a drink." Then it took him 3 days to get back to me.
How dare he?
I know. And then we went out on New Year's Eve, and literally that was it. That was it, because we were both older. We were both like 32.
Mm-hmm.
We both traveled. He lived in Australia, and it was like it was almost like, okay, we've done what we need to do now. We're just ready to settle down, and we were on the same page quite quickly. And so it was just, yeah, that was it.
That was it. That was it.
So,
and you've created this beautiful family together, and
yeah.
and you've been through difficult times together. Yeah, I don't know to what extent you want to talk about it, but obviously I think this is part of, when you talk about this, your story, like going through these difficult times led you to really go on the self-development journey that you've been through the past couple of years. So, I mean, the biggest one obviously was the sudden loss of your father. And yeah, I mean, talk to me about that experience and how it shifted things for you. Because I know loss of a parent is it's a very fundamental kind of loss that, is natural to experience as a child, but is like it's potent. It's a potent thing. It's intense.
Yeah, it really is. And so me and Oliver got together, and very quickly, so the first year I got pregnant, the second year we had Jacob, the next year we got married, the next year we had Molly, the next year my dad died, the next year we had Sam, and then 2 years later Oliver's business went bust. And so it was very like boom, 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 very, very quickly. So like there was a lot going on. And I think when my dad died, it was, so my dad got poorly when Jacob was a bit, no, before I had Jacob, actually, he got cancer, and he went through chemotherapy, and he had a major operation. He had cancer of the esophagus, and they rebuilt his esophagus. And so it was very determined, because I was pregnant at the time. He was very determined that it wasn't his time, and he was going to, really, he was so positive thinking, my dad. He was like always smiling, always positive thinking. It was always laughing, just a really amazing, proper Yorkshireman. And he was just determined that he was going to beat it. And so he kind of had that mindset. And I think, I've obviously developed that mindset from him, but he had this mindset that, I'm going to be all right. And so he went through all of that. And he recovered really quickly and really well. So he was at the wedding. He was there when Molly was born. He was going to buy her first shoes. And then in the May, he started to get this pain in his hip. And the doctor kept saying, oh, it's nothing. It's nothing. It's just a burster in your hip. Nothing. And in the August, we went on holiday, and my sister phoned me and said he's gone into hospital, and they took him straight into the oncology ward. And he had cancer all over his body, and none of us, it was such a shock, because we went to the oncology ward, and the doctor that came out had no idea that we didn't know he was that poorly. It was so, the misdiagnosis for months. If he'd have been able to walk in to a hospital, he could have had chemotherapy, but because they took him in, it was too advanced. And whether chemotherapy would have helped in hindsight, I don't know. But yeah, so very, very quickly, he became very poorly. And we were obviously planning my sister's wedding at the time. She was getting married in the October. And so from the August to kind of the October, it was, Dad's going to be there, but he's not going to walk you down the aisle. Dad's going to be there, but he's going to be in a wheelchair. Dad's not going to be there because now he's in a hospice. And it was just a very, very, obviously, just a not knowing, just that kind of, you're absorbed in it. Plus I've got these two small children at the time, one's 2 and one's 1. It was crazy. And I look back and I can't actually remember that much about it, because you're going through the motions every day, aren't you? And somehow the children were being fed, and I was going to the hospital or wherever was needed. And I look back and I think, the week before my sister got married, 2 weeks before, he went in, he got a chest infection, and he basically went into a coma, and they took him into a hospice. So it was in the hospice. And still at that point, you're thinking, do we cancel the wedding? What do we do? Do we have a wedding whilst he's in the hospital? It was just all of that uncertainty. And you look back and I just think, I don't know how we got through it. I don't know how we actually had conversations about this, because it's such a big thing when you're trying to you've got this thing planned and you can't. When do you pull the plug on it? When do you decide that you're not going to go ahead with it? And now I look back and it's awful to say, but I'm grateful that he died when he did, because he died and we were able to have the funeral before the wedding could then go ahead as a joyous occasion. Whereas if he'd have still been alive when the wedding, what would we have done? Would somebody have stayed with him and not? The wedding would have been so much about my dad and not about the wedding. It's those things that you look back and you think. So I think one of the things that, when I look at these significant things that happen in my life, so when I look at 9/11, I will always remember with you coming out and saying to me, you used to go to the Red Cross used to have these sessions, and you went to this Red Cross session and you came out and you said to me, I'm so grateful that I didn't have 2 parents that died. And I will always keep that with me, because that to me is where I'm going to cry, is where my foundation of gratitude came from. That even when you're at the lowest point, you've found something grateful out of the situation. And I think having that at the back of my mind, and then when my dad died, I was able to look and say, I'm so grateful that we were able to have the wedding, that we were able to have the funeral, and it was sad and it was everything it should have been. But then 2 days later, the same people were able to come together and have a joyous occasion. And it was joyous. It was a wonderful day. It was really, but you can look at it when you step away from it now. I can look back and I can say, even though it was awful at the time, you can look and you can say how it would have been different had it not happened the way it did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so beautiful. And I think like what you're talking about is acceptance, but also what you're talking about is life is hard. And that must have been a really horrible, hard time. And also there was beauty in that time. And you had this loss, but then you had this new beginning with your sister's marriage. And that's how life is all the time.
Yeah.
You know, like
Yeah.
it's death and birth, death and birth. And I think what you're just saying is like reminding people and looking back on your life is like tune into all of it, you know, like don't close yourself off to any of it. Don't close yourself off to the pain, but don't close yourself off to what to be grateful for. I don't remember saying that, but I do remember those meetings and they were very depressing. And some of those kids had been through much worse than me. And I was like, okay. I was like, okay.
And And I kind of kept that, and I kept your strength with me. And so the funniest thing is when I was having Jacob and it was a really long labor and I was gas and air and I was on this birthing ball for 12 hours. And all I kept saying to Oliver was like, I'm doing this for Bobby and Toland. And it was so funny because like, I kind of vaguely remember saying it, but you were obviously there, and the strength that you had shown me, I still carried that with me. And so there were things that like even subconsciously get me through, you know, even when it's at the worst.
I feel the same about the love that you showed me as a young person. Like I still carry that with me.
Yeah.
And it still gives me strength. Yeah. You know?
That's yeah. And so it is, and it's that cycle.
Yeah.
And what's really, really ironic about when my dad died was that exactly a year later, so he died on October the 15th. On October the 13th, my sister gave birth to William. So exactly a year later. And then on October the 14th, my sister-in-law, so nothing so connected to my husband's family, gave birth to her child at 27 weeks. So her first child. So that is, and then on the 15th was my dad's anniversary. And so it was that like the preciousness of life that it was just so ironic that these three, so now this celebration around that time of my dad's anniversary is like the celebration of, you know, my sister's baby being born, and then my niece who was born at 27 weeks and was very poorly, and so now is obviously thriving, you know, those kind of things. And then my dad's on it, so it just reminds you of like the fragile nature of life, and
why we should hold on to and love the people we have when they're around. Not that I'm so great at it, but even though I should have had, I've had the lessons to learn that, but it is true. And I think it's almost like, I just think about October being a month of celebration now for you, and how I'm sure your father would have wanted that. As you said, he was always smiling and celebrating. And I think that is a beautiful thing. So I want to move in. I mean, you can take things wherever you want to go, but you know, you've gone through all these things in life, you're raising children, you're really immersed in that. You were still doing, you know, your photography work at the same time, but talk to me about this self-development journey that you've been on. And for me, again, from me hearing your story, I think your decision to become sober is a huge part of that, but I know it's not the whole point of it. So just talk to me about where you see that journey really kicking off or picking up.
So I think it was before the pandemic, and I just we were living in this nice house. Oliver's business was struggling, and he built me this studio in the garden, which was amazing. And I had that limiting belief all the time there, you'll never make money from photography, you'll never make, and so I was trying my hardest at all these different things in photography and just never really believing in myself, so never really making any money from it. And yeah, having small children, after my dad died, my mum went into this real spiral of health anxiety. And, that was a really, really hard time, because I think, especially for me, because I was never close to my mum. And so it was, she was calling me up when it was at its worst. She was calling me up at night, you need to take me to hospital. I need to go to the emergency room. I've got this stomach ache, and it really, really severe. I mean, she ended up being taken into a psychiatric unit because she went in on her, she wasn't sectioned, but she went in on her own because it just got so bad that she needed, help with that. And so I found myself as a sandwich generation. I was looking after an elderly parent and small children. And it was just the guilt that you carry, because I should be with my mum more, and I've got to look after these kids. Plus you've got school, and I've got, I had 3 kids under 5, and when they started school, they were, doing everything. There were plays, and it was just non-stop. And so, of course, being, British, drinking's always the culture. It's like, that's what I grew up on. It was, I started drinking at 13 years old was when I first had a drink, and nobody told me that there was a different way. It was just expected. Everybody went down this like drinking route. And it became that crux in life that, you used it for everything. Depressed, drink, celebrating, drink, you're going out for whatever, drink. And then, but we also used to do it at home. So it becomes that, like, have a glass of wine at the end of the day. And you just fall into that routine of doing that. And so it was, managing. I wasn't pouring vodka on with cornflakes or anything like that. It was never like that. It was just a glass of wine at the end of the day. But that glass of the wine at the end of the day, every day, it takes its toll. And I was so immersed in it and so like doing it that you just go through the motions and it becomes a habit. And then I just suddenly thought to myself, maybe I should stop. Maybe I should just completely quit.
It was just a thought that came out of nowhere, or was it like did you see anyone get sober or anything like that?
So when I had the thought, then of course you go on social media, don't you? And then you get all of these things going on. And somebody I'd seen had done a challenge, 100-day challenge. And so of stopping. And I thought, maybe I should try that. And I tell you what, it was really difficult. I kept starting and stopping and starting and stopping because I would do so many days, and then it was like you're just in a habit loop, and that then began to frighten me because I was like, okay, this is ridiculous. It was just that habit, and then the pandemic hit, and of course, then it just locked down, and there's no reason not to drink because nobody's going out, and so it was like the only thing you could do was walk to the shop and get your wine or whatever and come home, and so it became that ritual of watching the news on an evening with a glass of wine, and then I would wake up in the morning and I would think, okay, I don't like this anymore. And I thought to myself, I just don't like it anymore. I'm gonna have to do something here. So I started to I joined a group. A guy was doing this, it was 1 year, no beer. So he was doing this, and he used to do daily Instagram feeds called Andy Ramage, and he's still doing them. And he's making films about not drinking. And he was he really spoke to me because he was like, he was exactly the same. He was, a successful guy, and like so many successful people are, they just fall into it. But he said, he was a middle lane drinker. That's what they're called, a grey area drinker. You could stop if you wanted to, but people carried, they didn't. So I decided so following him, it was so inspiring. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to do that. And he also did self-development courses. So I signed up for that. And then you could become accountable to people because people are doing So then you're learning all about the Stoics and Seneca, and you're learning all about these ancient wisdoms and things like that about self-development, about taking yourself, being the best version of yourself. And his bottom line of not drinking was like, why would you be at 50% when you could be at 100%? And that's what I felt like I was. Like I felt I was 50%. So I was doing all right, but I wanted to know what I was like at 100%. Because if I was all right at 50, surely at 100, I could be like, wow. So that's what I decided to do. I decided to like challenge myself and say, right, okay, so why don't you do this? And then I started to see other people doing it. And I started to see how they were progressing, and people started. I was in groups with people that were running marathons, and they were getting up at 5 a.m. and they were building businesses. And I was like, that's what I want to do. So you get inspired by the people who you're surrounding yourself with. And so that's where the self-development journey really started, doing a course with him and then finding a tribe of my own that inspired me and were on the same kind of page and doing the same kind of things.
Yeah. And I see like a connection between like this time and you moving to America to change. Like you had to shift, like you didn't literally move, but you literally shifted your environment and the people that were around you so you could change, so you could become a version of yourself that hadn't been possible previously. And I think there's a lot of wisdom in that.
I've never thought about that. Yeah, that is like America was an actual shifting of a location to do it, but this was a shifting of a mind to, right, I need to get rid of this to become this.
And surround myself with people who are doing what I want to do. You know, virtually in this case, but it's the same effect, you know?
Yeah. And so you start reading things. And when you start reading self-development books, that leads on to another book. And every book, and it's that classic, like when the student's ready, the teacher will show up. And it's the same as that was. So I read something that could mean a place, like it doesn't mean an actual teacher. It could be the place shows up. So for me, America showed up. Yeah. So this time it was like this showed up. And then the other people, and it's taking lessons from, it's just being open to what people are teaching you and open to opportunities and open to relationships. And so I did all these courses. Then I decided to do his coaching course because not particularly to become a coach myself, but because it was the next step in the self-development. Because I thought I can coach myself. I can, like, I've never done therapy, and I would love to. I can see the value of talking through things with people. And so that to me is like, I don't want to, like, I've never been on medication or anything like for antidepressants or anything like that. I'd rather do a talking therapy. And when my mum got sick, I was like getting her books and I was like, it's talking therapy you need. But she ended up on medication because that's what the avenue, she wasn't open to like that kind of talking or reading the right books could bring that change around. And I was like, I know that can happen. Like I wanted her to, she never grieved after my dad died. And I signed her up for grief counseling because I wanted her to go and speak to somebody, but she had this real, like, she wanted to be strong and she didn't want, and she wasn't open.
That's a reflection of the time she grew up in. And
yeah,
culture,
exactly.
You know,
mental health is just not talked about in her generation.
Not at all.
And so she went down all of this avenue of like physically feeling pain because she wanted to have something physically wrong with her. So she didn't have to admit it was a mind or that like it was something, a mental health that could be cured, or depression. She just didn't want to feel that all of this feeling could come from depression. There had to be something physically wrong with her.
Yeah.
And the more I went through that with her, the more I pushed myself to the other side of it's not that. It's definitely, you can be, like, you can talk, you can, if you read the right books and you listen to the right people and you're willing to do the work on yourself, you can do it without medication or, you know, that kind of.
Yeah. I mean, again, like there's a lot of nuance here because sometimes medication is the right path for certain people. It really depends. Yeah. It's a very complex scenario. But the point that you're speaking to is for you, that wasn't the right path. And for you got a lot out of doing this mindset work of taking this journey to because as you say, you know, although you had lived your own life and you know, exceeded the limitations that you grew up in and the expectations of your upbringing, at the same time you had these, what I'm picturing is these like limits on what you could do,
Yeah.
what you
Yeah.
felt was possible
Yeah.
for you. And
Yeah.
this work helped you move those limits out,
Yeah.
helped you
Yeah.
expand in
Yeah.
a certain sense and create the idea that more things were possible for you than you had previously thought or that you had
Yeah.
previously allowed yourself to believe. And so talk about just what this process has opened up for you or what has shifted in your life from being sober, from facing yourself, from doing this self-development work. You know, and again, like it can be anything. And I'm curious like what is surfacing for you in this moment.
I mean, I think I always said like that I felt alcohol kept me small in my life
Mm,
because I just didn't have to think about moving to the next level. So
yeah.
I always think of like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and I wanted to get to the top, and I didn't. I was just able to stay at the security level because as long as I was okay and I was, surviving, not thriving, and I wanted to see what it was like to kind of to go to that thriving level. And so when I stopped drinking, and which is really hard in this society, especially in Britain where it's
Totally.
everywhere, and it's not as easy as just saying, switch it off like that. I had like 30 years of like ingrained cards that you get, say it on it. Everything it's there. You go out for a meal, it's a drink. You go out.
And I'm sure a lot of people in your life reflected that back to you. Why aren't you having a drink? Why aren't you having,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it's the one thing that, if I said I was quitting smoking, nobody would be saying, come on, you can have one cigarette. I'm sure it'd be all right. They just wouldn't. But it's that kind of, and they don't want, when you stop drinking, I mean, I lost friends because when you stop drinking, it's a reflection back of perhaps it's something, perhaps I should stop. And people don't want to look at that.
yeah.
Like people just want to carry on because they're all right, and they enjoy it and it's all right. And that's fine. I just got to the point where it wasn't serving me and I wanted to kind of move on from it. Um, and so when I finally did do that, it was like I could suddenly see clearly. There was like this clarity that, and the confidence, and it's really stupid. Like you might just walk a bit like taller. I mean,
Mm.
it's stupid, but just
Not stupid. It's not stupid.
physically. So I lost 2 stone in weight because I was just, exercising more. You're not drinking wine like that, or so you're not holding that. And I wasn't like big before, but I suddenly lost this weight, and that gives you confidence, doesn't it? So then you stop listening to those little voices. And so what I noticed was that I recognized the voice because they used to say to you when you like people say when you quitting drinking, you have this like the wine witch, and people will say, the wine witch will come out at like a certain time of day and it'll be like, are you gonna have a drink tonight? And you've got to argue back and forth with this voice. And I knew as soon as I had that voice saying, are you gonna have a drink tonight? I'd be like, yes, I am, because I just would lose the conversation. And so what I recognized that voice from reading all these books. And then as soon as the voice came, I would immediately say, no, I'm not. And the voice would go. And
Mm,
so I learned that you could do that with other thoughts that come into your head. And
mm,
so it was
mm,
about learning about like reframing those limiting beliefs that you had and
mm.
actually like being able to talk back to yourself. So like the chimp mind, there's a very famous book called The Chimp Mind that talks about that kind of we've all got it. We've all got that voice in our heads, and it's learning to switch it and not listen to it, or replace it with a positive voice instead of listening to that whiny negative voice all the time. And
Yeah.
so that's what you learn to do. That's what I've learned to do. And it's incredible what you can do. It's amazing how you can shift it.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much, like, I think so many studies have come out about neuroplasticity that we actually, our minds are capable of shifting and changing in adulthood. We can
Yeah,
shift the programs and the stories. It takes practice, it takes intention.
yeah,
It's not
yeah.
it's simple, but it's not easy. But
It's not easy.
but it's
Yeah,
doable. And I think,
and it's repetitive. You've got to kind of repeat it all the time. You've got to notice when it comes, you've got to answer it back, and you've got to kind of shoot it down.
and the key is awareness. And so much what you're talking about, I came to this understanding from a different entry point, which is meditation. And, in meditation, they talk about just be present, breathing, and just notice your thoughts. And you notice all the crazy things your mind is saying to you. And once you hear it and really like with a different, like with a not your everyday mindset, you're like, why am I saying like this is silly? Like the stuff that I'm saying about all this negative things that I'm saying about myself or whatever. And you get that moment between the thought and taking an action at that space to choose something else. You get that moment. And that's what you're talking about is you were able to bring awareness, because the wine witch, like probably before you stopped drinking, like you would have that wine thought and then you'd say yes, but like you wouldn't even know like that interaction happened in your mind.
And I've learned a lot. I've read a lot of books about habit loops, and that's exactly it. You get the trigger, but before you act on the trigger, you've got to change the action. Yeah. So, instead of just autopiloting through it,
totally,
you change it. And so now, so I've done a course in being able to teach people how to do that with like an alcohol-free, because we did this as part of the coaching, positive psychology. I also did like an alcohol-free coaching, which is all about changing your habit loops. And that's massive. That's not just for drinking, that's for anything. It's just any kind of habit that you've got. But a lot of it, I think the key is it's self-awareness. It's just, and I think having that clear head gives you that self-awareness. Yeah. And you're not just like autopiloting through life all the time. And you're choosing your own decisions and your own directions, and not just doing it because you're tired at the end of the day or whatever, or just accepting it. I'm just not going to accept it anymore. And that, I think that was with like the limiting beliefs, and knowing that the voice that I hear in the head, you're not going to make money. That's not my voice. That's my parents' voice.
Totally.
And I don't have to live by that. That was what you believed. I don't have to believe that. I can see because of this, and this, that's not true. Mm-hmm. You don't get that unless you're really self-aware, and unless you kind of take the time. I think a lot of self-development takes time.
Totally.
People can't be bothered, can they?
I mean, they can't, or they're just they're not ready.
No,
they're not ready. And that's hard to see when we see other people on different paths, but we're not in their shoes. We don't know what they're going through. No. We can't live it from their viewpoint. But the point is that we can show people that there's a possibility, and they can decide to take that path or they cannot. But I think what you've learned and what you're reflecting back to me is as you say, like, just because you think it doesn't mean it's true. Just because it's a thought you have doesn't mean it's true. And that we get all this programming when we're young kids about who we are and how the world works. But we can shift that. We can shift that with intention and practice. But I also hear in you like this ambition. I don't know, it's probably not the right word, but this desire to grow, like this intense desire to grow. And I think I see that throughout your whole life. And so I'm curious, like what are you manifesting now, or what are you hoping for in the future now that you have allowed yourself to see some new possibilities?
I mean, so this year I did a vision board. I had so many things on this vision board, and some things were brought over from last year, but I've got, on one side of it is things that I would like to do. So like places I'd like to visit in the world, and things like, things like that, like the kind of house I'd like to live in, like that. And then on the other side, I've done things in business that I'd like to do. So personal achievements I'd like to do. And I put on a Post-it note, my sister said this to me. So she was like, put all the things on a Post-it note, and then when you've done them, move them to the side when they're complete. And so my board is just full on this side now of things I've done this year that I would never have dreamed possible. And it's things that I put on there that maybe impossible, or I think are impossible, but I'm like, I'm not going to put that on me anymore. I'm not going to put, I can't do that because it's impossible. Because why is it impossible? Like, if somebody can do it, why can't I do it? Like, so one of the things I live by is like, if not me, then who? And if not now, when? That
Yeah.
kind of, and maybe it is turning, being 51. Maybe it is like getting to an age. Maybe it is that I've got teenage children now and they don't need me in that kind of way, as in logistically needing me all the time to do everything. And maybe it's, and it definitely has freed up. And maybe because I don't drink anymore. So I've got this, like, when I do have free time, it's like proper clear free time to be able to plan and do and create and like just think of these possibilities that I want to do. And for many, many years, I've had this feeling that it's this stupid feeling that I'm meant to be doing something more than I'm doing, like that kind of desire that, like you say, it's like that I'm meant to be doing something and I'm not quite sure what it is, but every time an opportunity shows up, I'm taking that opportunity because it could be that I'm meant to be doing. So I'm not going to close the door because it might not be the right time now. I'm going to keep it open just in case, because I don't know what it is like in the future. So like, I want to write a book. I don't know what that book's going to look like, whether it's going to be a memoir, but it might not be. It might be something like a gratitude journal or something with photographs and affirmations and something that people can fill out, from. I want to use like what I've learned to inspire people and to show people that even when life gets to the worst of the worst, like there's always hope, there's always something to be grateful for. And that kind of positivity that, because the world is hard and life is hard, and life's hard without going through major setbacks or trauma or tragedy, like just general life, everyday life. And so kind of wanting to show people that every day you can find something, even if it's just going out and taking a picture with your phone of something like a flower or some, and yeah. And this is where then I get really like, I can't stop because I've got so many ideas in this.
And I think like that's beautiful. I think that feeling that you have is like, I just feel such a fire from you. And I keep hearing your Sagittarius moon throughout this conversation, which is a fire sign. I mean, there's such a fire in you. There's such a desire
to. And sometimes there's so many things that I want to do, and I stop myself because I don't know what to do, and then I don't do anything. So next year I'm going to pick something to do and go with it, because I need to just trust that I can do it and that there isn't a limit. So what I'd really like to do is go and teach on retreats around the world. Like, I'd love to get women together and connect them, and especially people that are going through, that are maybe carers that need to step out, have some time to, because without my sister, when we were going through with my mom, we had no like adult figure to turn to kind of to guide us, and there were no groups to, and I don't mean like
so many women are going through that now, like being carers and having not enough support and not enough self-care.
And even if it's just talking to somebody who's going through the same thing, that you can say, I feel this real guilt, or I feel this, like, what do you do about this, or how do you cope with that? Or I think what I really want to do next year is like connect people. I think that's where I'm really drawn to, building community around something. Getting people out in nature, walking, taking pictures, talking, just sharing something. Sharing that community feel. And I keep going back to that, and I'm not quite sure what it looks like, but
and I think, like that can be something you can kind of hone in on, and then come into the new year and figure out what that's going to look like. I just feel this energy from you, and it makes me really excited. I'm so excited to see what you're going to do. And I feel like this transformation that you've been through, these changes that you've been through, like, I think it's very clear to me that you're meant to share that with people in some way. I don't know what
I
that
think
way
so.
is. I don't know.
Yeah,
I have no idea.
yeah,
You don't know yet,
yeah,
but there is some way you're supposed to share. And
yeah.
I'm excited to see what that will look like. So I feel like we're coming to an end of the conversation. It's been a joy, as always, to connect with you.
Oh, it's
But
been lovely.
But if anyone who's listening wants to connect with you, how do you want to be connected with? Where do you want people to find you?
I mean, probably Instagram is the easiest one. So
Mm.
Louise Rayner Photography. I do have a website. It's the same it's the same name website. Yeah, but I think Instagram will be the place where if anything big happens next year, it will be there. I've got an exhibition going on in January, so that will be, so I'm going into the year already kind of,
Yeah.
as a photographer, an exhibition is up there as one of the big, and it's in a museum, so it's kind of been commissioned. And so that to me is like, yeah, that's a big and a really good way to start the year.
It's huge. That's so amazing. And I'm so like just overjoyed for you. And yeah, and I just really appreciate you doing this. It's always a risk. And I really loved getting to hear your story all at once like this and getting to hear your perspective on things. And I think it's so, like, as I said, I just feel like such like a mirroring between us in a lot of ways because we've both been on self-development journeys and we've both
Yeah.
been on this process together without, without either of us telling each other or anything like that.
Yeah.
And I just think it's a beautiful thing. And it's such a beautiful thing to get your wisdom and to your perspective.
Thank you so much for inviting me to do it, Tolan, because it's, I think when, I talk about pockets of stories, but not all together like that. And I think to be able to sit down and talk about the whole journey, and it makes me proud, to be able to look back and see how far I've come and kind of, and be proud of myself, which people don't say very often about themselves, do they? Which, it's quite nice to be able to say that.
Exactly. And I think, if not me, who is going to be proud of myself? Exactly. like you say. All right.